Now I've said this before, but I really like the Luigi's Mansion games. It's a shame that the first one was so hated, but in recent years it's grown in popularity to the point where a sequel's been made. But today I'm not here to rant about the haters or talk about the success story of Luigi's Mansion, I'm just here to compare the two games. I mean, I know you could figure that out by the title, but I felt like pointing it out. So without any further ado, here it is, Luigi's Mansion versus Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This should come as no shock, but Dark Moon wins this one. Kinda similarly to my last versus rant, the one with Infamous, the original Mansion, in my opinion, is the best out of all 6. But that's the thing, the other 5 mansions are in Dark Moon. Individually, none of the 5 add up to the first mansion, however combined they give a lot more variety to the game. Sure, on one hand you could argue that they're all just generic theme levels, but the thing is, they always add something interesting to the theme. And I know I talked about it last year, but do I really need to mention Treacherous Mansion? Really, thanks to these, Dark Moon just has more variety. You know, there's kind of an interesting history with music in the Luigi's Mansion games. In the original Luigi's Mansion, most of the music is just the same track over and over with different instrumentation. However, contrary to popular belief, there is music in the game other than that. In Dark Moon, it's kind of the same deal, only there's multiple tracks that keep getting remixed, and like I said, there is music outside of them. While my favorite music track in the series is the credit theme from the first game, I think Dark Moon's music overall is better, mainly because there's more variety, and the instrumentation also just sounds nicer. Considering this is a game series where you hunt ghosts, it makes a lot of sense that one of the big categories in comparing them would be the ghosts you're fighting. The original wins this by a long shot because despite being way shorter than Dark Moon, it actually has a wider variety of ghosts that you fight. New ones keep getting introduced as the game progresses, and some of them have some really interesting strategies in order to beat them. And that's without even mentioning the portrait ghosts, which are one of the highlights of the game as they were creative, required some thinking to beat, and there were a whole bunch of them all throughout the mansion. In Dark Moon, let's face it, aside from the bosses, which aren't being counted in this section, you're pretty much fighting the same 6 ghosts over and over again for the most part. Okay, bosses. This is a category that Dark Moon excels at. Throughout the game, you fight 5 possessor ghosts, which possess various things, and they all lead to very unique and very different boss battles, whether fighting suits of armor, a giant spider, or a giant frozen lake. As for the original, if you counted all the portrait ghosts as bosses, then it probably would win, but I'm not. I'm just counting the one that the game considers bosses as bosses. And as for those, they're good, but they're not as good or varied as the bosses in Dark Moon are, but they still are pretty enjoyable. Also, Dark Moon had a way better boss fight with King Boo than the original. I know it sounds weird counting the Boos as their own category, especially when I had a category specifically for ghosts, but the Boos play a bit of a different role in the game than the rest of the ghosts, so I think it counts. In the original game, for every room that was lit up, you had to search objects, and when you got close enough with the Boo radar, then the Boo popped out and you had to suck it up into your vacuum. I will admit, when you get to Area 4, the Boo's health can get ridiculous, and coupled with the fact that they can go through walls, it can be pretty frustrating, but I found it kind of fun and very satisfying when you manage to finally get them. In Dark Moon, however, in order to get a Boo, you first have to reveal a hidden object, then a Boo will come out and you have to fight it in an admittedly not very hard fashion. Problem is that there's a Boo each mission, and each mission, they could be in any hidden object anywhere in the mansion so long as you have access to it at that point. Really, to me, it's not worth going out to look for them, and when I do find one, it's not really that satisfying. It's just like, oh hey, I found a Boo, might as well catch it. So yeah, in case you couldn't tell, the original wins this one. Both the Luigi's Mansion games also have their fair share of puzzles in them. Now, the original had the portrait ghosts, which I'm not counting under this since they counted under ghosts. So, what other puzzles do they have? Well, they have a couple. Dark Moon, on the other hand, seems to have a lot of puzzles going for it. There are a lot of missions that involve solving a bunch of puzzles. There's a bunch of hidden areas, as well as a bunch of gems scattered throughout each mansion for you to collect. Really, I just overall find the puzzles better in Dark Moon. As you would imagine, a game series about hunting ghosts would have some scary moments in it. While it's nothing to give you nightmares, the Luigi's Mansion series does have some creepy moments in them, and I'm not gonna lie, most of it's from the first game. Really, the darker atmosphere in this game does make for some scarier moments, like when you're caught off guard when a ghost shows up. And just in general, the atmosphere is kinda stronger here. In Dark Moon, maybe it's due to the larger focus on slapstick comedy, but a lot of the stuff really isn't that scary. Well, that's funny how this worked out. I actually like the original Luigi's Mansion more, but Dark Moon ended up winning. I guess that just means it's the better game, at least under this specific set of conditions it is. Don't get me wrong, I still really like both of these games. And despite what the scores say, I think in terms of how much I like them, these games are closer together than the two infamous games I compared. With all that said, guys, I'm Defoffilizer, and I'll see you on Halloween for my next countdown.